My sister-in-law smirked. Too bad you couldn't have kids. My husband chuckled. We needed better genes anyway. I didn't flinch. I just stood up, smiled, and handed him a folder. No one knew what was inside. But when he opened it, his smile froze. And I walked out without looking back. Ava, you're glowing, my friend Sarah said, squeezing my hand across the restaurant table. Marriage suits you. I couldn't help but smile. 6 months into married life with Ethan, and I still felt like I was floating on air. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, I admitted, twirling my wedding ring. It's almost too perfect. Sarah laughed. You deserve this happiness. After what you went through with Derek. I shuddered, remembering my ex-boyfriend who'd cheated on me with my roommate. That betrayal had left me questioning everything about love and trust. But Ethan was different. From the moment Jake introduced us at that coffee shop downtown, I knew he was special. I'm telling you, you two are meant for each other, Jake had said, practically pushing Ethan toward my table. You both love those weird foreign films nobody else understands. Ethan had approached nervously, coffee cup in hand. So Jake says you're the only other person in Seattle who actually enjoyed that 3-hour Russian movie about the bread factory. I'd burst out laughing. It wasn't about bread. It was a metaphor for the human condition. See, this is why we need to be friends, he'd said, sliding into the seat across from me. For hours later we were still talking. The cafe had emptied around us, but neither of us wanted to leave. Ethan told me about his job at the marketing firm, his dream of traveling to New Zealand, his slightly obsessive relationship with crossword puzzles. I shared my work at the nonprofit, my fear of spiders, my secret addiction to reality TV shows. I have a confession, he'd said as we finally gathered our things. I don't actually like foreign films. I just wanted an excuse to talk to you. That honesty was what hooked me. No games, no pretense. Just genuine interest in getting to know me. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Ethan would show up at my office with surprise lunches, claiming he was in the neighborhood, even though his workplace was across town. We'd spend entire weekends exploring Seattle, discovering little bookshops and trying restaurants we'd never heard of. I love how you see the world, he told me one evening as we walked along the waterfront. You find magic in ordinary things. The proposal came during a camping trip to Olympic National Park. We'd hiked to a secluded lake, and as the sun set over the water, Ethan suddenly got down on one knee. I know this might seem fast, he said, his voice shaking. But I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, a vintage setting he'd found at an antique shop, knowing I preferred unique pieces over traditional diamonds. When I said yes, he spun me around right there on the rocky shore, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. Planning the wedding was effortless. We both wanted something small and intimate, just family and close friends. My mother worried we were rushing things, but even she couldn't argue with how happy we were together. Our wedding day was perfect. The ceremony in my parents' backyard felt like a celebration of not just our love, but our families coming together. Ethan's parents embraced me warmly, and his sister Rebecca seemed genuinely excited to have a new sister-in-law. Welcome to the family, she'd said, hugging me tight after the ceremony. Ethan's been talking about you non-stop for months. The honeymoon in Tuscany was everything I'd dreamed of. We rented a small villa and spent our days exploring medieval towns and vineyards. Ethan would wake up early to bring me coffee in bed, and we'd plan our adventures for the day while watching the sun rise over the rolling hills. I want to remember every moment of this, I told him one morning as we sat on our terrace. We have a lifetime of moments ahead of us, he replied, kissing my forehead. Settling into married life back home felt natural. We'd bought a small house with a garden and I loved making it ours. Ethan would come home from work with flowers from the grocery store, claiming they were just because gifts. We established routines that felt comforting rather than boring. Tuesday nights became our cooking experiments, where we'd try to recreate dishes from our travels. Ethan was hopeless in the kitchen, but his enthusiasm made up for his lack of skill. We'd end up ordering pizza after burning whatever we were attempting, but we'd laugh until our sides hurt. You know what I love most about being married? He said one evening as we cleaned up another kitchen disaster. Having someone to share all these ridiculous moments with. Weekend mornings were sacred. We'd sleep in, then spend hours in bed talking about everything and nothing. Ethan would trace patterns on my arm while I told him about my weird dreams, and he'd share his latest work drama or family stories. "I want to build something beautiful with you," he said one Saturday, looking around our sunlit bedroom. "A real home, a real family." The conversation about children came up naturally. We'd be walking through the park and see kids playing, or visit friends with new babies, and we'd find ourselves talking about our future family. "I hope our kids have your eyes," Ethan would say, studying my face. "And your sense of humor." "I hope they have your patience," I'd respond. "And your ability to make friends with everyone." These conversations felt easy, natural. We'd discuss names we liked, wonder about how many children we wanted, imagine holidays with little ones running around. The future stretched ahead of us, full of possibilities. But around month 7 something began to shift. Ethan started working later, coming home distracted and tired. When I'd ask about his day, his responses became shorter, less detailed. "Everything okay at work?" I asked one evening, noticing he'd barely touched his dinner. "Fine," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Just busy season." I tried not to read too much into it. Every marriage had adjustments, right? We were still figuring out how to be husband and wife, not just boyfriend and girlfriend. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. The shift became impossible to ignore when Ethan started leaving baby magazines on the coffee table. Not just one or two, stacks of them with pages folded down at nursery designs and baby gear reviews. I'd find them scattered around the house like breadcrumbs, leading to a conversation I wasn't ready to have. "Look at this crib," he said one Tuesday morning, shoving his phone across the breakfast table. "It converts into a toddler bed. Smart investment, right?" I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "Investment for what, exactly?" "For when we have kids," he said as if it were obvious. "We should start thinking about these things now." The casualness of his tone unsettled me. When had children shifted from a someday dream to an immediate expectation? I watched him scroll through more baby furniture, his eyes bright with an enthusiasm that felt foreign. "Don't you think we should talk about timing first?" I asked carefully. He looked up, and for a moment I saw something flicker across his face. Impatience? Frustration? It was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "We've been married 8 months, Ava. Most couples start trying after a year." Most couples. The phrase hung in the air between us. When had we become a statistic instead of partners making decisions together? That evening I found him in the spare bedroom, measuring the walls with a tape measure. The room we'd been using as a home office was suddenly being evaluated for something else entirely. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. "Just checking if a standard crib would fit," he said without looking up. "This would make a perfect nursery." My chest tightened. "Ethan, we haven't even decided if we're ready." He straightened, meeting my eyes for the first time in days. "Aren't you ready? I mean, what are we waiting for?" The question felt loaded, dangerous. I searched his face for the man who used to ask my opinion about everything, who valued my thoughts and feelings. This person staring back at me seemed like a stranger. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I just thought we'd have more time to enjoy being married first." His expression darkened. "Time for what? We're not getting any younger, Ava." There it was again, that phrase that made me feel like I was failing some invisible timeline. At 28, I felt like I had plenty of time to make this decision. But Ethan's urgency was making me question everything. Over the following weeks, every conversation somehow circled back to children. Dinner with friends became opportunities for him to comment on their kids. Movies with family themes prompted lengthy discussions about parenting styles. Even grocery shopping turned into lessons about organic baby food and childproofing products. "Did you know Sarah's pregnant again?" he said one evening, looking up from his phone. "That'll be 3 kids in 5 years. I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. Good for her. She said they weren't even trying this time. Just happened naturally. He paused, studying my face. Makes you wonder what we're doing wrong. Wrong. The word hit me differently than he probably intended. Were we doing something wrong by not immediately starting a family? Was I wrong for wanting to feel more settled first? The worst part was how the pressure was changing me. I found myself avoiding baby-related conversations with friends, dreading family gatherings where relatives would inevitably ask about our plans. Every month that passed felt like another failure in Ethan's eyes. "My mom asked if we're having fertility issues," he said one night, his tone casual but his words cutting. I nearly dropped the book I was reading. You discussed our private life with your mother? She's just concerned. We've been married almost a year. A year isn't that long, Ethan. It is when you're 32, he snapped. Some of us don't have the luxury of waiting forever. The comment stung. I wasn't asking to wait forever. I was asking for us to make this decision together when we both felt ready. But somehow my hesitation had become the enemy. I started noticing how he looked at me differently now. Where once his gaze had been warm and loving, now it felt calculating. Like he was evaluating my worth based on my reproductive potential rather than seeing me as the woman he'd fallen in love with. Maybe we should see a doctor, he suggested one morning over breakfast. Just to make sure everything's working properly. Working properly? I repeated, incredulous. I'm not a machine, Ethan. You know what I mean. We should get checked out. Rule out any problems. Problems. There was that word again. When had my body become a problem to be solved rather than something to be cherished? The breaking point came during dinner at his parents' house. His mother, Rebecca, and his sister-in-law Jennifer were all there, and somehow the conversation turned to children. Jennifer's pregnant with her third, his mother announced proudly. Due in the spring. Congratulations, I said, forcing a smile. What about you two? Jennifer asked, her hand resting on her barely visible bump. Any plans? I felt Ethan's eyes on me waiting for my response. The expectation in the room was suffocating. We're still figuring things out, I said carefully. Figuring things out? Rebecca laughed. What's to figure out? You've been married almost a year. Some people need more time, I said, feeling defensive. Time for what? Jennifer pressed. You're not getting any younger. If you wait too long you might miss your chance. The words felt like a slap. I looked at Ethan, expecting him to defend me, to shut down this invasive line of questioning. Instead, he nodded along as if they were simply stating facts. Maybe we should stop being so cautious, he said, looking directly at me. Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. The drive home was silent, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. When we got inside, he finally exploded. Do you even want children? He demanded. Because if you don't, I need to know now. The question hung between us like a challenge. I did want children, someday. But I also wanted to want them with the right person at the right time for the right reasons. Not because I was being pressured or because everyone else expected it. I want children when we're both ready, I said quietly. When will that be? When you're 35. 40. His words were becoming cruel, designed to hurt rather than understand. This wasn't the gentle, patient man I'd married. This was someone who saw me as an obstacle to his timeline. I don't know, I admitted. But I know it's not right now. Something cold settled in his eyes. Then maybe we have a problem. The problem between Ethan and me festered for weeks after that confrontation, but it was Rebecca's sudden interest in my health that first raised my suspicions. She'd always been friendly enough, but now she was showing up at my house with herbal teas and vitamin supplements. You look tired, Ava, she said one afternoon, setting down a bag of mysterious bottles on my kitchen counter. These will help boost your energy. I take them religiously. I picked up one of the bottles, reading the unfamiliar ingredients. What exactly are these for? Women's health, she said vaguely. Hormonal balance, fertility support. You know, all the things we need to stay healthy. Something in her tone made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't pinpoint why. She seemed so eager for me to take them, almost pushy about it. The green tea blend is especially good, she continued, pulling out an unmarked package. I brew it fresh every morning. You should try it. I thanked her and put everything away, but something nagged at me. Since when had Rebecca become so invested in my health? She'd never shown this kind of concern before. Over the next few days she kept checking in about the supplements. Text messages asking if I was taking them regularly, phone calls wondering how I was feeling. When I mentioned I hadn't started them yet, her voice took on an edge. Ava, you really should be taking better care of yourself. Especially if you and Ethan are planning to start a family. There it was again, the constant pressure about children. But coming from Rebecca it felt different. More calculated. I started paying closer attention to her behavior during family gatherings. She was always the first to offer me drinks, insisting on specific teas or smoothies she'd prepared. When I'd politely decline, she'd become strangely persistent. Just try a sip, she'd say, practically forcing the cup into my hands. I made it especially for you. The breakthrough came when I arrived early to Sunday dinner at Ethan's parents' house. I was looking for the bathroom when I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Rebecca and her mother, Ethan's mom, speaking in low, urgent tones. How much longer do we need to keep this up? Rebecca was saying. Until she stops trying, came the reply. The doctor said it could take months to completely clear her system, but we need to be consistent. My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, straining to hear more. She's getting suspicious about the supplements, Rebecca continued. She keeps asking questions. Then find another way. Put it in her food at dinner. She trusts us. What if Ethan finds out? He won't. He's too focused on blaming her for not getting pregnant. He has no idea we're helping nature along. The words crashed over me like a wave. They were drugging me, deliberately preventing me from conceiving while my husband grew more frustrated and distant with each passing month. I managed to slip back outside and re-enter through the front door, acting as if I'd just arrived. But my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my purse. During dinner I watched Rebecca with new eyes. She insisted on serving me personally, making sure I got the special salad she'd prepared. Every encouraging smile now looked sinister, every gesture of care revealed as manipulation. You're not eating much, she observed. You need to keep your strength up. I forced myself to take a few bites, my stomach churning with each swallow. How long had this been going on? How many meals, how many teas, how many helpful supplements had I consumed without knowing what they really contained? The next morning, I called Dr. Martinez's office and scheduled an emergency appointment. When I explained my concerns to the nurse, she squeezed me in that afternoon. I need comprehensive blood work, I told Dr. Martinez. I think someone might be affecting my ability to conceive. She raised an eyebrow but didn't question my request. We'll test for everything. Hormones, vitamins, any foreign substances that might be interfering with your reproductive system. 3 days later she called with results that confirmed my worst fears. Ava, I need you to come in immediately. There are some concerning findings in your lab work. Sitting in her office that afternoon, I felt the room spin as she explained what they'd found. There's a synthetic hormone blocker in your system. It's not something you take accidentally. It's specifically designed to prevent ovulation and implantation. Someone has been giving this to you regularly over several months. The clinical terms washed over me, but the meaning was crystal clear. I'd been systematically poisoned by people I trusted, people who were supposed to love me. Can you reverse it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, but it will take time. Depending on how long you've been exposed, it could be several months before your system returns to normal. I left her office with copies of all my test results, my hands clutching the evidence of the betrayal. But I also left with something else. A growing determination to expose the truth. That evening, I sat in my car outside Rebecca's house, watching her through the kitchen window as she prepared what looked like another batch of her special tea blend. I took photos documenting everything I could. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life. I found the supplements Rebecca had given me and took them to a private lab for analysis. I recorded conversations when she called to check on my health. I even installed a small camera in my kitchen to capture what she might be adding to food when she visited. The evidence mounted quickly. The supplements contained the same hormone blockers found in my blood. The tea blend had additional compounds designed to disrupt my menstrual cycle. Even some of the dinner dishes at family gatherings were tainted. But the most damning evidence came from a conversation I recorded between Rebecca and her mother during a visit to my house. The inheritance is too much to risk, I heard Rebecca's mother say through my hidden recorder. If she has children, Ethan's share gets divided. We can't allow that. I know, but this is getting complicated. She's asking too many questions. Then we need to work faster. Make Ethan think she's the problem. If he divorces her for being infertile, we're protected. Listening to that recording, everything finally made sense. This wasn't just about preventing me from having children. It was about money. About ensuring that Ethan's inheritance wouldn't be shared with any future grandchildren. They'd been willing to destroy my marriage, my health, and my dreams for their own financial gain. But now I had proof, and I was going to use it. Planning the confrontation required more strategic thinking than I'd ever applied to anything in my life. I spent the week carefully orchestrating every detail, knowing I'd only get one chance to expose the truth before they could spin the narrative in their favor. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as I sealed it that Friday morning. Inside were the lab results, the recorded conversations, photographs of the tainted supplements, and divorce papers my lawyer had helped me prepare. But there was one more document, something I'd discovered just 2 days earlier that would shatter any remaining illusions about this family's true nature. I'd hired a private investigator to dig deeper into their financial situation, and what he uncovered was staggering. Ethan's inheritance wasn't just substantial, it was conditional. His grandfather's will specifically stated that the money would be divided among any biological heirs. If Ethan had children, his share would be split with them. But if he remained childless, he'd inherit everything. More damning was the paper trail showing Rebecca had consulted with a lawyer about inheritance law just 3 months after our wedding. The timing wasn't coincidental. Sunday dinner at the family home felt like walking into a theater where everyone knew their role except the audience. I arrived precisely on time, the envelope tucked discreetly in my purse, my wedding ring deliberately absent from my finger. "Ava, darling," Ethan's mother greeted me with her usual air kisses. "You look wonderful. Rebecca made your favorite roast." Of course she did. I wondered what special ingredients she'd added this time. Ethan pulled out my chair with exaggerated chivalry, his hand lingering on my shoulder. "You seem different tonight," he murmured. "More relaxed." If only he knew. I'd never felt more focused in my life. Rebecca bustled around the kitchen making a show of serving everyone. When she placed my plate in front of me, I caught her eyes and smiled sweetly. "Thank you for always taking such good care of me," I said, my tone warm but my words carefully chosen. She beamed, completely missing the undercurrent. "Anything for family." Dinner conversation flowed around typical topics: work, weather, neighborhood gossip. I participated minimally, watching the family dynamics with new clarity. Every glance between Rebecca and her mother, every subtle signal, now made perfect sense. "You're quiet tonight," Ethan's father observed. "Everything all right?" "Just thinking about the future," I replied honestly. "Speaking of the future," Ethan said right on cue, "I've been looking at houses in the Maple Ridge neighborhood. Great schools, family-friendly community." Here it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. "That sounds lovely," I said, reaching for my purse. "Actually, I have something for you, Ethan." The casual conversation died as I stood and pulled out the manila envelope. Every eye in the room fixed on me as I walked around the table to where Ethan sat. "What's this?" he asked, accepting the envelope with a puzzled smile. "Just some paperwork I thought you should see." He opened it with the confidence of someone who had no idea his world was about to implode. I watched his face as he pulled out the first document, the lab results showing synthetic hormone blockers in my system. His smile faltered. "What is this?" "Keep reading." The next document was the analysis of Rebecca's supplements. Then the recorded conversations. Then the inheritance research. With each revelation, more color drained from his face. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Really? Let me help explain." I turned to address the entire table. 4 months, I've been systematically drugged by members of this family to prevent me from conceiving children. Rebecca dropped her fork with a clatter. Ethan's mother went rigid in her chair. "That's ridiculous," Rebecca stammered. "Why would we?" "Because children would mean splitting Ethan's inheritance," I continued calmly. "Something you've known since consulting with a lawyer 3 months after our wedding." Ethan's head snapped up. What inheritance? I almost felt sorry for him. He genuinely didn't know about the conditional nature of his grandfather's will. "Your grandfather's estate," I explained. $15 million that gets divided among any biological heirs. No children means you inherit everything. Children mean sharing. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan looked between his mother and sister, realization dawning on his face. "You knew," he said to his mother. "You knew about the will and you didn't tell me." "We were protecting you," she said defensively. "Protecting the family." "By poisoning my wife?" Rebecca found her voice again. "We were protecting your future. You don't understand the financial implications." "I understand perfectly," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "You've been drugging Ava to protect money." He turned to me and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. "Ava, I swear I didn't know. I had no idea what they were doing. But you knew something was wrong with me, I said quietly. You blamed me for not getting pregnant. You made me feel broken, defective. I was frustrated, yes, but I never would have. You told me maybe we should divorce if I couldn't have children, I reminded him. You made your priorities very clear. His face crumpled. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. I pulled out the final document from the envelope, the divorce papers. And that's why I'm making it easy for you. The paper shook in his hands as he read. Ava, please. We can work through this. I'll cut them off. We'll start fresh. No, I said simply. We won't. But I love you. The words hung in the air, hollow and meaningless. I looked around the table at this family who had welcomed me with smiles while systematically destroying my health and my marriage. Love doesn't do what you've done, I said. Love doesn't let other people poison the person you claim to care about. Love doesn't make conditions based on reproductive capability. I walked toward the door, feeling lighter with each step. Behind me, voices erupted, accusations, denials, desperate attempts to salvage what couldn't be saved. Ava, wait. Ethan called. I paused at the doorway and turned back one final time. The papers are already filed. My lawyer will be in touch. And then I walked out into the cool evening air, breathing freely for the first time in months. I had barely taken 3 steps toward the front door when Rebecca's chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Her voice, high and desperate, cut through the stunned silence. Wait, you don't understand, she called out, her composure completely shattered. This isn't what it looks like. I stopped but didn't turn around. Something in her panic told me this moment wasn't over yet. Rebecca, don't, her mother warned sharply, but it was too late. The dam had broken. I was protecting this family. Rebecca continued, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. You think you know everything, but you don't. The supplements were just vitamins and the tea was for your health and... Rebecca, stop talking, Ethan's father commanded, but she was beyond listening. I slowly turned around to face her. She was standing now, her hands shaking, mascara beginning to smudge under her eyes. The perfectly composed woman who had orchestrated months of deception was falling apart in real time. You want the truth? She said, her voice cracking. Fine. Yes, I gave you those supplements. Yes, I put things in your food. But it wasn't supposed to hurt you permanently. The admission hit the room like a physical force. Even though I had suspected it, hearing her confess so openly left everyone speechless. Rebecca, her mother hissed, but Rebecca was beyond control now. She was never supposed to find out, Rebecca continued, gesturing wildly toward me. The doctor said the effects would wear off eventually. We just needed time to figure things out to make sure the inheritance stayed in the family where it belongs. Ethan stood up slowly, his face a mask of disbelief. You poisoned my wife. I protected your future. Rebecca shot back. Do you have any idea what $15 million means? What it could do for this family? For your children when you have them with someone more suitable? The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Someone more suitable. So that had been their plan all along. Not just to prevent me from having children but to drive Ethan away from me entirely. More suitable? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Rebecca's eyes darted around the room, realizing she'd revealed too much. But the floodgates were open now. Someone from our social circle, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Someone who understands family legacy and tradition. Someone who wouldn't dilute the bloodline with... With what? I pressed. With ordinary genetics, she finished, her mask of superiority sliding back into place even as her world crumbled around her. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Ethan looked like he'd been slapped. Ordinary genetics? He repeated slowly. You think Ava has ordinary genetics? She's from a middle-class family, Ethan. Her father sells insurance. Her mother works at a dental office. What kind of legacy is that for our grandchildren? Actually laughed. The sound startled everyone, including myself. Your grandchildren? I said. Rebecca, you don't have children. You've never been married. What exactly makes you the authority on suitable genetics? Her face flushed red. I've sacrificed my own happiness for this family. I've dedicated my life to preserving what our grandfather built. By poisoning people? By making hard choices that needed to be made. Ethan's mother finally found her voice. Rebecca, that's enough. But Rebecca was beyond stopping. Years of resentment and entitlement were pouring out. You think this was easy for me? She demanded. Watching you two play house while the inheritance hung in the balance? Pretending to care about your health while making sure you couldn't ruin everything we've worked for. We didn't work for anything, Ethan said quietly. Grandfather did. He earned that money. And he wanted it to stay in the family. Rebecca screamed. Not get divided up among a bunch of children with ordinary genes from ordinary people. I looked around the room at this family that had welcomed me with such warmth initially. Ethan's father sat with his head in his hands. His mother stared at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. And Ethan, poor Ethan, looked completely lost. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? Rebecca's defiance wavered for a moment. Since the engagement party. When we realized how serious you were about her. 2 years, I said, the timeline becoming clear. You've been planning this for 2 years. The will reading was when we knew for certain about the inheritance conditions, Rebecca's mother added quietly, finally speaking. We had to protect the family's interests. Whose idea was it? Ethan asked. The question hung in the air. Rebecca looked at her mother, who avoided her gaze entirely. It was mine, Rebecca said finally. I researched the medications, I found the suppliers, I planned everything. But I caught the look that passed between her and her mother. This had been a joint effort, even if Rebecca was taking the fall. The fertility specialist you recommended, I said, suddenly remembering. Dr. Hartwell. He was in on it too, wasn't he? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. He's my college roommate's husband, she admitted. He agreed to run tests that would show you were having fertility issues, even though you weren't. The web of deception was more extensive than I'd imagined. They hadn't just been drugging me, they'd been manipulating my medical care, creating a false narrative about my health that would justify their actions. This is insane, Ethan said, sinking back into his chair. You're all insane. We're practical, Rebecca snapped. Something you've never been. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Rebecca was still talking, still confessing, still justifying her actions. Every word was evidence. What are you doing? She asked, noticing the phone. Making sure there's a record of everything you just admitted, I said. For the criminal charges I'll be filing tomorrow. The color drained from her face. Criminal charges? Assault, fraud, conspiracy. My lawyer thinks we can make a strong case. Rebecca looked around the room desperately, finally realizing the magnitude of what she'd just done. In her panic and rage, she'd confessed to everything on record. You can't do this, she whispered. Watch me, I said, and walked out the door. The front door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed through the evening air. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the crisp autumn night, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My car was parked at the end of the driveway, but I found myself walking slowly, savoring each step away from that house. The porch light cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and I could hear muffled voices still arguing inside. They could fight all they wanted now. It was no longer my battle. Ava. Ethan's voice broke through the quiet night. I heard the front door slam open behind me, his footsteps quick on the walkway. Please, just wait a minute. I reached my car and turned around. He was standing halfway down the driveway, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled from the emotional chaos of the evening. In the dim streetlight, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable than the man who had been pressuring me about children just weeks ago. This changes everything, he said, walking closer but keeping his distance. I had no idea what they were doing to you. You have to believe me. I do believe you, I said simply. But it doesn't matter anymore. How can you say that? I'm innocent in this. They manipulated both of us. I leaned against my car, studying his face. You're right. You didn't know about the drugging. But you knew something else, didn't you? He shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean? You knew I wasn't the problem. Deep down, you knew something was wrong with the situation, not with me. But instead of investigating, instead of supporting me, you chose to blame me. I was frustrated. You told me we should divorce if I couldn't have children, I interrupted. You made me feel defective, broken, unwanted. You may not have known about the drugs, but you certainly knew how to twist the knife. The words hung between us in the cool night air. Ethan's shoulders sagged as the truth of what I was saying settled in. I can change, he said quietly. We can start over. I'll be different. I know you will, I said, and I meant it. This experience will change you. You'll be more careful with your next relationship, more aware of how your words affect someone you claim to love. But that relationship won't be with me. Ava, please. I love you. The words that once made my heart flutter now felt hollow. Not because he didn't mean them, but because I finally understood that his love had always come with conditions I could never meet. You love the idea of me, I corrected gently. You love having a wife who fits into your family's expectations, who can give you the children you want on your timeline, who won't question the way things have always been done. But that's not who I am. He took a step closer. That's not true. I fell in love with you before any of this happened. Yes, you did. But you fell out of love with me the moment I couldn't deliver what you needed fast enough. A car drove by, its headlights briefly illuminating both our faces. In that moment I saw him clearly, not as the villain of my story, but as a man who had been raised by people who valued money and status over humanity and love. He was as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, just in a different way. The divorce papers will be processed within 60 days, I said gently. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want my freedom. What about the house? Your things. I already moved my important items out yesterday. You can keep the rest. He looked stunned. You planned this whole thing. I had to. Once I knew the truth, I couldn't stay in that environment another day. I've been staying with my sister while I figured out what came next. And what does come next? He asked. I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in months. I don't know yet. That's the beautiful part. Behind us, the front door opened and Rebecca appeared, her face pale in the porch light. She started walking toward us, but I held up my hand. Don't, I called out. We have nothing left to say to each other. Ava, I can explain. You already explained enough. My lawyer will handle any further communication. Rebecca stopped walking, wrapping her arms around herself. This will destroy the family. No, I said firmly. You already did that. I'm just refusing to be destroyed along with it. I opened my car door and paused, looking back at Ethan one last time. For what it's worth, I said, I hope you find happiness. Real happiness, not the kind that comes from money or family approval. And I hope when you do find it, you'll recognize it and fight for it properly. Ava. Goodbye, Ethan. I got into my car and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see him standing in the driveway, Rebecca walking back toward the house, the warm light spilling from windows that had once felt like home. As I drove away, I rolled down the windows despite the cool air. The wind rushed through my hair, carrying away the last remnants of a life that had been slowly suffocating me. At the first red light, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were clear, no longer clouded with confusion and self-doubt. My face looked different somehow, stronger, more determined. This was who I really was beneath all the manipulation and gaslighting. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. How did it go? I typed back, it's over. I'm free. Her response came immediately. Come home. I made your favorite soup. Home. Not the house I'd shared with Ethan. Not the fantasy life I'd tried to build with someone who couldn't truly see me. Home was where people loved me unconditionally, where I didn't have to perform or prove my worth. I drove through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, past the coffee shop where Ethan and I had first met, past the park where we'd had our first real conversation. These places no longer held the power to hurt me. They were just locations now, part of a story that had ended. Pulling into my sister's driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, savoring this feeling of completeness. I had done something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I had walked away from a life that looked perfect on the outside but was poison on the inside. The porch light came on and my sister appeared in the doorway, her face full of concern and love. Real love, the kind that didn't come with timelines or conditions or genetic requirements. I stepped out of the car and felt my feet solid on the ground beneath me. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding. Tonight I would simply be grateful for the courage to choose myself. The night air felt crisp and full of possibility. For the first time in over a year I was exactly where I belonged. Heading 6. The final freedom. Walking away from the past. The front door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed through the evening air. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the crisp autumn night, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. My car was parked at the end of the driveway, but I found myself walking slowly, savoring each step away from that house. The porch light cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and I could hear muffled voices still arguing inside. They could fight all they wanted now. It was no longer my battle. Ava. Ethan's voice broke through the quiet night. I heard the front door slam open behind me, his footsteps quick on the walkway. Please, just wait a minute. I reached my car and turned around. He was standing halfway down the driveway, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled from the emotional chaos of the evening. In the dim streetlight, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable than the man who had been pressuring me about children just weeks ago. "This changes everything," he said, walking closer but keeping his distance. "I had no idea what they were doing to you. You have to believe me." "I do believe you," I said simply. "But it doesn't matter anymore." "How can you say that? I'm innocent in this. They manipulated both of us." I leaned against my car, studying his face. "You're right. You didn't know about the drugging. But you knew something else, didn't you?" He shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean?" "You knew I wasn't the problem. Deep down you knew something was wrong with the situation, not with me. But instead of investigating, instead of supporting me, you chose to blame me." I was frustrated. "You told me we should divorce if I couldn't have children," I interrupted. "You made me feel defective, broken, unwanted. You may not have known about the drugs, but you certainly knew how to twist the knife." The words hung between us in the cool night air. Ethan's shoulders sagged as the truth of what I was saying settled in. "I can change," he said quietly. "We can start over. I'll be different." "I know you will," I said, and I meant it. "This experience will change you. You'll be more careful with your next relationship, more aware of how your words affect someone you claim to love. But that relationship won't be with me. Ava, please. I love you." The words that once made my heart flutter now felt hollow. Not because he didn't mean them, but because I finally understood that his love had always come with conditions I could never meet. "You love the idea of me," I corrected gently. "You love having a wife who fits into your family's expectations, who can give you the children you want on your timeline, who won't question the way things have always been done. But that's not who I am." He took a step closer. "That's not true. I fell in love with you before any of this happened." "Yes, you did. But you fell out of love with me the moment I couldn't deliver what you needed fast enough." A car drove by, its headlights briefly illuminating both our faces. In that moment I saw him clearly, not as the villain of my story, but as a man who had been raised by people who valued money and status over humanity and love. He was as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, just in a different way. "The divorce papers will be processed within 60 days, I said gently. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want my freedom." "What about the house? Your things?" "I already moved my important items out yesterday. You can keep the rest." He looked stunned. "You planned this whole thing?" "I had to. Once I knew the truth, I couldn't stay in that environment another day. I've been staying with my sister while I figured out what came next." "And what does come next?" he asked. I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in months. "I don't know yet. That's the beautiful part." Behind us, the front door opened and Rebecca appeared, her face pale in the porch light. She started walking toward us, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I called out. "We have nothing left to say to each other." "Ava, I can explain." "You already explained enough. My lawyer will handle any further communication." Rebecca stopped walking, wrapping her arms around herself. "This will destroy the family." "No," I said firmly. "You already did that. I'm just refusing to be destroyed along with it." I opened my car door and paused, looking back at Ethan one last time. "For what it's worth," I said, "I hope you find happiness. Real happiness, not the kind that comes from money or family approval. And I hope when you do find it, you'll recognize it and fight for it properly." Ava. "Goodbye, Ethan." I got into my car and started the engine. Through the windshield I could see him standing in the driveway, Rebecca walking back toward the house, the warm light spilling from windows that had once felt like home. As I drove away, I rolled down the windows despite the cool air. The wind rushed through my hair, carrying away the last remnants of a life that had been slowly suffocating me. At the first red light, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were clear, no longer clouded with confusion and self-doubt. My face looked different somehow, stronger, more determined. This was who I really was beneath all the manipulation and gaslighting. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. How did it go? I typed back, "It's over. I'm free." Her response came immediately, "Come home. I made your favorite soup." Home. Not the house I'd shared with Ethan, not the fantasy life I'd tried to build with someone who couldn't truly see me. Home was where people loved me unconditionally, where I didn't have to perform or prove my worth. I drove through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, past the coffee shop where Ethan and I had first met, past the park where we'd had our first real conversation. These places no longer held the power to hurt me. They were just locations now, part of a story that had ended. Pulling into my sister's driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, savoring this feeling of completeness. I had done something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I had walked away from a life that looked perfect on the outside but was poison on the inside. The porch light came on and my sister appeared in the doorway, her face full of concern and love. Real love, the kind that didn't come with timelines or conditions or genetic requirements. I stepped out of the car and felt my feet solid on the ground beneath me. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding. Tonight I would simply be grateful for the courage to choose myself. The night air felt crisp and full of possibility. For the first time in over a year I was exactly where I belonged.
Hi, I'm Samantha Miller, 32 years old, and until last month, I was supposed to be the best woman at my brother Jason's wedding. We've always been close, so when his fiancée Tiffany came into the picture, I was thrilled for him. That is, until I received that text from the wedding planner Melinda, "Your family canceled your invitation, but keep the $50,000 deposit." My heart dropped. I immediately called Jason, but it went straight to voicemail. Something wasn't right about Tiffany and her wealthy family, but I never expected this. Before I dive into this nightmare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit subscribe, and join me on this wild wedding journey that changed my life forever. Growing up, Jason and I were more than just siblings. We were each other's anchors. Only 5 years apart, we navigated our parents' messy divorce together when I was 15 and he was 10. While our parents were busy fighting over assets and pointing fingers, Jason and I created our own little support system. I helped him with homework, attended his Little League games, and made sure he never felt alone. In return, he was my biggest cheerleader, leaving encouraging sticky notes on my mirror before big tests and defending me fiercely against neighborhood bullies despite being younger. After college, Jason flourished as a software engineer at a promising startup. He was smart, hardworking, and genuinely kind, qualities that made me incredibly proud to be his sister. When he called me 2 years ago, practically shouting through the phone about meeting someone special at a charity gala his company sponsored, I was ecstatic for him. "Sam, she's amazing," he gushed. "Tiffany Blackwell. She runs her family's foundation, and she's brilliant and beautiful and somehow agreed to go out with me." The first time I met Tiffany, I understood Jason's infatuation. She was strikingly gorgeous with long blonde hair, perfect makeup, and clothes that screamed old money without trying too hard. Her laugh was musical, her posture impeccable, and she looked at Jason with what seemed like genuine affection. Still, something felt slightly off about her perfectly polished demeanor, though I chalked it up to my own insecurities. A month into their relationship, we were invited to dinner at the Blackwell estate, a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. The driveway alone was longer than my entire street, lined with perfectly manicured topiaries and ending at a circular fountain that probably cost more than my annual salary. William and Victoria Blackwell greeted us with practiced smiles and firm handshakes. William, tall and distinguished with silver hair, immediately launched into questions about Jason's career trajectory and investment portfolio. Victoria, who looked like an older version of Tiffany with the same blonde hair and athletic build, assessed me with cool blue eyes. "Samantha, Tiffany mentioned you work in marketing, was it?" she asked, somehow making my successful career sound like a hobby. "Yes, I'm a marketing executive at Morris & Klein," I replied, trying not to sound defensive. How quaint, she responded, before turning to ask the server to bring more wine. Throughout that dinner, I became acutely aware of my department store dress among their designer clothes, my sensible car parked among their luxury vehicles, and my state college education versus their Ivy League pedigrees. The Blackwells moved through life at a different altitude, one where summer was a verb, where personal assistants handled life's inconveniences, and where family names opened doors I didn't even know existed. Despite feeling like an outsider, I smiled and engaged, wanting to support Jason, who was clearly trying to impress Tiffany's family. He shot me grateful glances whenever I smoothed over awkward moments or redirected uncomfortable questions about our family's divorce. After a year of dating, Jason called me in the middle of a workday, something he rarely did. "Sam, I'm doing it. I'm proposing to Tiffany next weekend," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and terror. "Will you help me pick out the ring? I'm completely lost." We spent Saturday morning visiting jewelers, and I watched my pragmatic brother transform into someone willing to spend 3 months' salary on a diamond the size of a small marble. When he asked if it was too much, I swallowed my financial concerns and told him, if she's the one, then it's perfect. When Tiffany said yes, Jason called me first. I could hear the relief and joy in his voice, and I pushed aside my lingering reservations. My brother was happy. That was what mattered. The wedding planning began immediately, with Tiffany's mother taking charge. The venue was a historic mansion with sprawling gardens. The guest list quickly grew to 300 people, most of whom Jason had never met. The estimated budget passed $250,000, a figure that made me gasp when Jason mentioned it casually over coffee. "That's a lot," I said carefully. "Are you comfortable with that? I can contribute something if it would help." Jason shook his head. Tiffany's parents insisted on covering everything. Apparently, this is actually modest compared to her cousin's wedding last year. He laughed, but I noticed a tightness around his eyes. "And you're okay with all this?" I pressed gently. "Of course. It's important to Tiffany, and her family has traditions. Besides, her dad said something about this being an investment in connections, whatever that means," he shrugged. When Jason asked me to be his best woman, I was touched beyond words. It was so perfectly us, breaking tradition to honor our bond. Tiffany seemed less enthusiastic. "Are you sure you want to do that?" I overheard her asking Jason. "It's not really traditional, and the photos would look so unbalanced. Plus, would Sam even be comfortable in that role? She's not exactly wedding party material." That comment stung, but when Jason insisted, Tiffany acquiesced with a tight smile. "Of course, if it's important to you. We'll make it work somehow." Looking back, I should have recognized that moment as the first real warning sign. But I was determined to support my brother's happiness, even if it meant dealing with the bridezilla and her intimidating family. I had no idea just how dark this fairy tale wedding would become. The first major crack in the wedding facade appeared during bridesmaid dress shopping. Tiffany had arranged for all 7 bridesmaids to meet at an exclusive bridal boutique downtown, the kind with champagne service and private fitting rooms larger than my bedroom. As the only non-socialite in the group, I felt immediately out of place among Tiffany's friends, who all seemed to know each other from prep schools, country clubs, or family connections. "Ladies, this is Sam, Jason's sister," Tiffany introduced me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The other women, Madison, Caitlin, Ashley, Brittany, Lauren, and Harper, gave me polite nods before returning to their conversations about recent vacations in Santorini and weekend homes in the Hamptons. While waiting for my turn to try on dresses, I overheard Tiffany in the next fitting room, speaking to Madison in a hushed but audible tone. "I know, it's awkward having her here. She's nothing like Jason, no polish, no style. But what could I do?" "He insisted she be included," Tiffany sighed dramatically. "At least we convinced him to drop that ridiculous best woman idea. Can you imagine her in a suit standing next to the groomsmen? Disaster." Madison laughed. "Well, at least she's thin. We can put her at the end of the line in photos and crop her out if needed." My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I forced myself to remain composed. This day wasn't about me, it was about Jason. When the consultant, Vivian, pulled me aside to discuss dresses, her expression shifted subtly as she looked at my simple blouse and jeans. "Tiffany has selected Marchesa for the bridal party," she informed me, her French accent making the designer name sound even more exclusive. "The gowns begin at $3,000. Will that be an issue?" $3,000. That was my monthly rent. I swallowed hard. "That's more than I expected to spend on a dress I'll wear once," I admitted quietly. Vivian's smile tightened. "Perhaps you should discuss this with the bride. We do have payment plans available for those with budget concerns." When I pulled Tiffany aside to discuss the cost, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. "Oh, I assumed you knew. Everything in this wedding is top tier," she said dismissively. "If it's really a problem, I'm sure Jason would be happy to cover it for you. After all, it's his big day too." The suggestion that I should ask my younger brother to pay for my bridesmaid dress stung, but I didn't want to create drama. Later, when I mentioned the situation to Jason over lunch, he immediately offered to pay. "Don't worry about it, Sam. It's no big deal," he insisted, but I noticed he checked his banking app before making the offer. "Jason, that's not the point. $3,000 for a bridesmaid dress is excessive, and Tiffany made me feel like I was being difficult for questioning it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "A nervous habit from childhood. Tiffany comes from a different world, Sam. This is normal for her. Please just go with it." For me, I reluctantly agreed, but our usual easy rapport felt strained. Over the following weeks, Jason became increasingly difficult to reach. My texts went unanswered for days, and our weekly coffee meetups were repeatedly canceled due to wedding planning emergencies. The bridal shower was another exercise in discomfort. Held at the Blackwell Country Club, the event featured a 5-course lunch, a champagne fountain, and gifts that made my carefully handcrafted memory book for Tiffany look painfully inadequate. I'd spent weeks collecting photos of Jason growing up, adding heartfelt stories and welcome messages to the family. When Tiffany opened it, she flipped through the pages quickly and said, "How creative," before setting it aside to exclaim over a crystal vase from one of her sorority sisters. Victoria Blackwell cornered me by the dessert table later, champagne flute in hand. "Samantha, dear, Jason mentioned you'll be attending the wedding solo? No +1. "That's right," I confirmed, taking a large bite of cake to avoid elaborating. "Such a shame. A woman your age should be focused on finding a partner. Perhaps after the wedding, we could introduce you to some suitable men from our circle? With a little effort on your appearance and some social polishing, you might have potential." I nearly choked on my cake. "I'm quite happy with my life as it is, but thank you for your concern," I replied as evenly as possible. Victoria patted my arm condescendingly. "Of course you'd say that, dear. Pride is easier than change. By the way, have you sorted out your contribution to the wedding fund? The $50,000 family deposit?" "Excuse me." I blinked in confusion. This is the first I'm hearing about any deposit. "Oh," Victoria's perfect eyebrows rose. "I assumed Jason had discussed this with you. Traditionally, both families contribute. Since your parents are unavailable, we expected you would handle the Miller family portion. It's quite standard, really." Before I could respond, she was called away by the event planner, leaving me stunned and confused. Jason had explicitly told me that the Blackwells were covering all wedding costs. Why was Victoria suggesting I owed money? When I finally managed to speak with Jason the next day, he seemed uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject. "Don't worry about what Victoria said. It's all being handled," he assured me. A week later, I received an email about wedding party roles, only to discover that my position had been changed from best woman to bridesmaid, without any discussion. When I called Jason, Tiffany answered his phone. "Oh, Sam. Yes, we had to make some adjustments for symmetry in the ceremony. Jason meant to tell you, but we've been so busy. You understand, right? It's actually better this way, less pressure on you." As the weeks passed, I felt increasingly sidelined in my own brother's wedding. The final blow came when I learned through social media that my scheduled speech at the reception had been assigned to Tiffany's father instead. The brother I'd grown up with was disappearing before my eyes, absorbed into the Blackwell family vortex, and I was being systematically pushed out of the picture. 3 months before the wedding, I received a text from Rachel, a mutual friend who had known Jason and me since college. "Hey, did you know they moved up the wedding? Just got my new save the date for June instead of August. Weird they didn't mention it to you first." I stared at my phone in disbelief. The wedding date had been changed by 2 months, and no one had bothered to tell me? I immediately checked my mail. Nothing. My email. Nothing. I even checked my spam folder, thinking perhaps the new save the dates had been sent electronically. Nothing. When I finally reached Jason, he sounded distracted and vaguely apologetic. "Oh yeah, Tiffany's grandmother is having surgery in August, so we moved things up. Sorry, I thought you knew. Tiffany said she'd update the wedding party. Jason, I'm your sister and supposedly a bridesmaid. How could you not tell me directly that your wedding date changed? I've been swamped, Sam." The venue change was a nightmare, and Tiffany's been stressed about the accelerated timeline. "Look, I've got to run to a cake tasting. We'll catch up soon, okay?" He hung up before I could respond, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. The following weekend was supposedly the bachelor and bachelorette parties, a joint affair at a winery followed by separate evening celebrations. I learned about it only when I saw Instagram stories posted by Rachel. When I texted her in confusion, she replied, "I assumed you were invited but couldn't make it." That's what Tiffany told everyone when someone asked where you were. My hands shook as I dialed Tiffany's number. For once, she answered promptly. "Sam, how are you?" Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Tiffany, why wasn't I invited to the bachelor and bachelorette weekend?" I asked directly. "What? Of course you were invited. I sent all the bridesmaids an email weeks ago." "Are you saying you didn't get it?" She sounded genuinely surprised, but something felt off. "Oh my gosh, it must have gone to spam. I'm so sorry. I even mentioned to Jason that we hadn't heard back from you, but he said you were probably just busy with work. You do work such long hours." The gaslighting was so smooth that for a moment, I questioned my own sanity. Had I somehow missed an invitation? But a quick search through every folder in my email confirmed no such invitation existed. The final dress fitting was scheduled for the following week. When I arrived at the boutique, the same consultant, Vivian, greeted me with confusion. "Ms. Miller? We weren't expecting you today. Your fitting is not on the schedule. There must be a mistake." "All bridesmaids are scheduled for final fittings today," I insisted, showing her the text confirmation on my phone. Vivian disappeared into the back room and returned looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but it appears your dress order was canceled 3 weeks ago." "Canceled? By whom?" She hesitated before responding. "According to our records, the bride called to remove one bridesmaid dress from the order. Your measurements are no longer in our system." My stomach dropped as I scrolled through my phone to find Tiffany's number. Before I could call, a text from her appeared. "Sam, so sorry about the mix-up at the boutique. There was a miscommunication with the orders. Don't worry, we'll rush order your dress from another designer. These things happen with weddings." Instead of responding, I drove straight to Jason's apartment. After knocking repeatedly, he finally opened the door, looking surprised to see me. Behind him, I could see suitcases open on the floor, clothes neatly folded inside. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "My bridesmaid dress was canceled, Jason. The boutique said Tiffany removed me from the order 3 weeks ago." I pushed past him into the apartment. "And now you're packing? For what?" "Another wedding event I haven't been told about." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "It's just a pre-wedding trip with Tiffany's family to their lake house. A chance to relax before the final wedding push. And let me guess, I wasn't invited to this either?" Jason sighed, sitting heavily on the couch. "Look, Sam, Tiffany thought it would be easier if you weren't in the wedding party. She feels you haven't been committed to the process. Missing meetings, not responding to emails I never received, events I was never told about." I interrupted, my voice rising. "Jason, can't you see what's happening? They're isolating you from me, from your life before them." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Tiffany just wants things to be perfect. She thinks your situation might be distracting. My situation? What does that mean? He looked down at his hands. You know, your commitment issues. Being single, focusing so much on work. Tiffany thinks you might feel uncomfortable being paired with her cousin Bradley for the procession since you don't have a date. I was speechless. My successful career and independent life were being framed as character flaws. While Jason continued making excuses, I noticed a wedding planning binder on his coffee table. Flipping it open, I found a seating chart for the head table. My name had been crossed out, with Family Table 2 written beside it in neat handwriting. Jason, I said quietly, turning the binder toward him. I'm not even sitting at the head table anymore. When were you planning to tell me that? Before he could answer, my phone chimed with an email notification from Melinda Barnes, the wedding planner, with the subject line, Urgent, Family Deposit Confirmation. The email from Melinda Barnes was brief but baffling. Dear MS. Miller, this is a final reminder that the family contribution deposit of $50,000 is due by Friday to secure all vendors. Please confirm payment method. Best regards, Melinda Barnes, Elite Events. I stared at my phone in confusion. What family contribution? Jason had repeatedly assured me that the Blackwells were covering all wedding expenses. Jason, why is the wedding planner asking me for $50,000? I demanded, showing him the email. He paled visibly, taking the phone from my hand and reading the message twice. There must be some mistake. Let me call Melinda. But before he could dial, I took my phone back. No, I'll call her myself. Right now. Melinda answered on the second ring, her voice professionally cheerful. Elite Events, Melinda speaking. Hi Melinda, this is Samantha Miller, Jason's sister. I just received your email about a family deposit, and I'm confused because this is the first I'm hearing about it. There was a pause before she responded. Oh, I see. Let me check our records. I could hear keyboard clicking in the background. According to our paperwork, you were designated as the financial guarantor for the Miller family contribution 3 months ago. I have the signed agreement right here. That's impossible. I never signed anything. I'm looking at the document now, Ms. Miller. It has your signature dated February 12th. My heart raced. Can you please email me a copy of this document right now? While waiting for the email, I glared at Jason, who was pacing nervously, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. Tell me you didn't forge my signature on a financial agreement, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Sam, it's complicated, he began, but was interrupted by my phone chiming with Melinda's email. The document showed a perfect replica of my signature on a contract agreeing to provide $50,000 as the Miller family contribution to the wedding expenses. I recognized it immediately as copied from a birthday card I'd given Jason months earlier. What the hell, Jason? I whispered, feeling physically ill. You forged my signature for $50,000? Money you know I don't have? I didn't forge anything, he protested, then immediately backtracked. I mean, Tiffany said it was just a formality. That her parents would actually cover it, but they needed someone from my side to be listed for symmetry in the planning documents. She promised it was just paperwork. So you let your fiancé forge my signature on a legally binding financial document? Do you realize that's fraud? Jason sat down heavily, his face in his hands. I didn't know they were actually going to ask you for the money. Tiffany said what? That it was okay to commit fraud using my name? That it was fine to put me on the hook for money I never agreed to pay. The apartment door opened, and as if summoned by our argument, Tiffany walked in. She was impeccably dressed as always, but her expression hardened when she saw me. Sam. What a surprise, she said coolly. I thought we were meeting at 4, Jason. Tiffany, did you tell the wedding planner I agreed to pay $50,000 for your wedding? I asked directly. Instead of appearing shocked or apologetic, Tiffany merely sighed, setting her designer bag on the counter. I see we're having this conversation now. Yes, we're having this conversation now, I snapped. You forged my signature and committed fraud. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? She rolled her eyes slightly. It's a wedding planning document, not a federal case. And, honestly, I thought you'd want to contribute. After all, Jason is your only brother. Contribute? I was never even asked. And $50,000? That's more than my annual salary. Tiffany's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. Well, we assumed you had savings. Besides, the Blackwells are covering over $200,000. Your family should handle something. My family? I am his family. And neither of us has that kind of money. I turned to Jason, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Did you know about this? Did you agree to this? Jason wouldn't meet my eyes. Tiffany and her parents kept saying it was traditional for both families to contribute. They made me feel like I wasn't bringing enough to the marriage already. Her dad kept making comments about Tiffany marrying down. So you offered up my finances instead of standing up for yourself? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. I was going to tell you, he mumbled. I just couldn't figure out how. Tiffany stepped between us. Look, Samantha, I've tried to include you in this wedding. I really have. But you've been difficult from day one. You question every decision, you don't fit in with our social circle, and frankly, your negative energy is stressing Jason out during what should be the happiest time of his life. My negative energy? I echoed in disbelief. You've systematically excluded me from every event, removed me from the wedding party without telling me, and committed fraud using my name. See? This is exactly what I mean, Tiffany said to Jason, as if I'd just proven her point. Always the drama, always making things about her. I looked at my brother, waiting for him to defend me, to recognize the manipulation happening right in front of him. Instead, he sighed deeply. Maybe Tiffany's right, Sam. Maybe it would be best if you weren't involved in the wedding. There's clearly too much tension, and we don't need any more stress right now. His words hit me like a physical blow. After everything we'd been through together, after all the years of supporting each other, he was choosing Tiffany's toxic influence over our relationship. Are you serious right now? I whispered. You're uninviting me from your wedding? It's not uninviting, Tiffany corrected smoothly. It's just recognizing that your presence might create unnecessary drama on our special day. I grabbed my purse, tears threatening to spill. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd choose someone like her over family, Jason. She's shown you exactly who she is, and you're still too blind to see it. As I headed for the door, Tiffany called after me. We'll still need that deposit by Friday, though. Contractually speaking. I slammed the door behind me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the elevator button. Before I reached the lobby, my phone chimed with a text from Melinda, the wedding planner. Your family canceled your invitation, but keep the $50,000 deposit. I spent the next 24 hours alternating between crying and staring numbly at my apartment ceiling. How had things gone so terribly wrong? The brother who had been my rock through our parents' divorce, who had helped me move into my first apartment, who had called me first with every major life update, was now a stranger under Tiffany's influence. When my friend Rachel called to check on me, I finally broke down and told her everything. Sam, this is insane, she gasped after hearing about the forged signature and financial demand. What they're doing isn't just mean, it's potentially illegal. Have you looked at your credit report recently? I hadn't, but Rachel's question sent a chill through me. If they were willing to forge my signature on one document, what else might they have done? That evening, I pulled my credit report and discovered 6 recent inquiries from various wedding vendors: the caterer, the florist, the rental company, the photographer, the videographer, and the venue itself. Someone had been using my personal information to apply for credit with multiple businesses. My hands shaking, I called my friend Michael, who worked as an attorney specializing in identity theft. Based on what you're telling me, this is textbook fraud, he confirmed after hearing the full story. They forged your signature, used your personal information without consent, and are now attempting to collect money based on fraudulent representations. You need to document everything and consider filing a police report. A police report? Against my own brother. The thought made me physically ill. Sam, I know he's your brother, but he's allowing his fiancée to commit crimes using your identity. This could impact your credit score, your financial future, and potentially even lead to legal problems for you if vendors start coming after you for unpaid bills. The following day, I began methodically gathering evidence, screenshots of the forged document, copies of the credit inquiries, text messages from Tiffany and Jason, and the emails from the wedding planner. Looking at it all laid out chronologically made the pattern of manipulation crystal clear. What hurt most wasn't the money or even the fraud. It was realizing that Tiffany had been systematically isolating Jason from me from the beginning. The brother I knew would never have allowed someone to treat his sister this way. The Jason I grew up with would have seen through Tiffany's manipulations immediately. For 2 days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away, to protect myself from further hurt. But another part, the part that had always looked out for my little brother, couldn't abandon him to a woman who had shown such calculated cruelty. On the 3rd day, I learned through social media that the Blackwells were hosting a pre-wedding dinner at their estate that evening, the dinner Jason had been packing for when I confronted him. All the wedding party and close family would be there. It would be my last chance to reach Jason before the wedding. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, professional, dignified, and impossible to criticize. I loaded all my evidence onto a tablet and made one additional copy of everything on a USB drive. Then I drove to the Blackwell estate, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The security guard at the gate initially refused to let me in, saying my name wasn't on the guest list. But when I mentioned I had important legal documents regarding the wedding that needed immediate attention, he reluctantly called the house. To my surprise, I was granted access, likely because they thought I was bringing the signed deposit agreement. I parked my modest sedan among the luxury cars and took a deep breath before walking up to the imposing front door. A server in formal attire opened it before I could knock, and I could hear the murmur of conversation and tinkling of glasses from the dining room. My entrance caused an immediate hush to fall over the gathering. Around an elegantly set table sat the entire wedding party, the Blackwell family, and a few people I didn't recognize, likely important business associates or extended family. Jason's face drained of color when he saw me, while Tiffany's expression hardened into a mask of controlled anger. Samantha, Victoria Blackwell, broke the silence, her voice arctic. "We weren't expecting you." The invitation clearly stated formal attire. Her eyes flicked dismissively over my simple dress. "I wasn't invited," I replied calmly, remaining in the doorway. "But given that my name and financial information have been used without my consent for this wedding, I thought I should be present for at least one event." William Blackwell stood, his imposing height clearly meant to intimidate. "Young lady, if you're here about the family contribution, this is hardly the time or place." "I'm not here about money," I interrupted. "I'm here because fraud has been committed in my name, and I wanted to give everyone involved a chance to make this right before I'm forced to take legal action." The room erupted in murmurs. Jason half rose from his seat, his face a mixture of shame and alarm. "Sam, please, can we talk about this privately?" "We're past that point, Jason," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've tried talking privately. Now I need everyone to understand exactly what's been happening." I moved to the head of the table and opened my tablet, projecting the screen onto the dining room wall using the built-in system I'd spotted upon entering, clearly used for business presentations during dinner parties. 3 months ago, this document was submitted to Elite Events wedding planners with what appears to be my signature. I began professionally, displaying the forged agreement. "I never saw this document before yesterday, and I certainly never signed it." Melinda Barnes, the wedding planner, was seated near Tiffany's mother. Her eyes widened as she looked between the document and me. "Furthermore, my personal information has been used to submit credit applications to 6 different wedding vendors without my knowledge or consent." I displayed the credit inquiry report. "And finally, I've been systematically excluded from wedding events while simultaneously being held financially responsible for them." Victoria Blackwell's perfect composure slipped slightly. "These are merely misunderstandings that can be cleared up. They're not misunderstandings," I cut in firmly. "They're deliberate actions taken primarily by your daughter, with my brother's complicity." Tiffany stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "How dare you crash our dinner and make these ridiculous accusations? Jason, are you going to let her talk about me this way?" All eyes turned to my brother, who looked torn and miserable. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy who used to look up to his big sister, who trusted me to always tell him the truth. "Is it true?" he asked me quietly. "All of it." "Yes," I said simply. "I have all the evidence right here. Tiffany and possibly her parents have been using my financial information without consent while simultaneously pushing me out of your life." William Blackwell cleared his throat. "This is all very theatrical, but easily resolved. Name your price, Ms. Miller. Everyone has one." He pulled out a checkbook from his dinner jacket. 10,000? 20? Let's settle this unfortunate misunderstanding now. The casual way he offered to buy me off, as if my relationship with my brother had a price tag, crystallized everything wrong with the Blackwells. They truly believed everything and everyone could be purchased. "My relationship with my brother isn't for sale," I stated firmly. "And attempting to bribe me only further demonstrates your family's character." Tiffany turned to Jason, her face a perfect mask of distress. "Are you going to let her ruin everything we've built? Everything we've planned?" "She's always been jealous of what we have, Jason. She's lonely and bitter and wants to destroy our happiness." Jason looked between us, clearly struggling. Then he stood and walked slowly to the projected document on the wall, studying the signature. "This is from the birthday card Sam gave me," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I recognize the little heart she always puts over the I in Miller." He turned to Tiffany. "You said this was just a formality. That your parents were covering everything. You promised me no one would actually ask Sam for money." "Of course we were going to ask her," Victoria interjected. "Why should we pay for everything? It's traditional for both families to contribute." "My family isn't wealthy," Jason replied, his voice growing stronger. "You've known that from the beginning. Sam works hard for every dollar she earns. She can't afford this, and you know it." Tiffany grabbed his arm. "Baby, we can discuss all this later. She's just trying to come between us like she always does." "No, Tiffany. Sam has never tried to come between us. In fact, she's bent over backward trying to support our relationship despite how poorly your family has treated her." Jason's voice was steady now, his spine straightening as if a weight was lifting. "She's the most important person in my life, and I've let you push her away. I've let you manipulate me into hurting her." "Well, if she's the most important person in your life," Tiffany spat, her beautiful face contorted with rage, "then you've just made your choice very clear. It's her or me, Jason. Right now." The room went silent, everyone holding their breath. Jason looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months. Then he slowly removed the platinum engagement ring from his finger and placed it gently on the table. "I choose my sister," he said quietly. "I choose the person who has loved me unconditionally my entire life. I choose the truth over whatever this is." He gestured around the opulent room. Tiffany's gasp was theatrical. "You cannot be serious. After everything my family has done for you? After all we've invested in this relationship?" "That's just it," Jason replied sadly. "It was always an investment to you. A transaction. You never really loved me for who I am." William Blackwell's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You'll regret this decision, young man. I was prepared to offer you opportunities you couldn't imagine. Connections that would have set you up for life. I'm sure I would have paid for those opportunities many times over," Jason responded, moving to stand beside me. "Sam, I'm so sorry. Let's go home." As we walked out together, leaving behind the stunned silence of the Blackwell dining room, I heard Victoria's sharp voice, "Melinda, cancel everything. Immediately." The wedding that had nearly destroyed our relationship was over before it began. The drive back to my apartment was initially silent. Jason stared out the passenger window, his profile illuminated by passing streetlights, looking simultaneously relieved and devastated. I kept my eyes on the road, processing the whirlwind of emotions from the confrontation at the Blackwell estate. "I can't believe I just did that," Jason finally whispered, more to himself than to me. "Are you okay?" I asked, glancing over briefly. He let out a shaky laugh. "No, not at all. I just ended my engagement in front of 30 people after discovering my fiancé committed fraud using my sister's identity." He ran his hands through his hair. But also, yes, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months. When we arrived at my apartment, I made us both hot chocolate, our childhood comfort drink for difficult conversations. We sat on my worn but comfortable couch, mugs in hand, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. "I need to apologize, Sam," Jason began, his voice thick with emotion. "I let Tiffany come between us. I ignored the red flags, made excuses for her behavior, and worst of all, I didn't protect you from her manipulation. Why didn't you tell me about the financial pressure they were putting on you?" I asked gently. Jason stared into his mug. At first, it was subtle. Comments about how generous they were being, hints that I should be contributing more. Then William started mentioning Tiffany's ex-boyfriends, how one bought her a car for her birthday, how another took her family to Bora Bora. The message was clear. I wasn't bringing enough to the table. So when they suggested I could contribute, you went along with it. He nodded miserably. Tiffany made it sound so reasonable. She said it was just a formality, that her parents would actually cover everything but needed your name on the documents for appearances. She promised no one would ever actually ask you for money. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, he corrected. I was in so deep, Sam. The Blackwells represented everything I thought I wanted: success, connections, a place in their world. And Tiffany. He paused, searching for words. When she focused her attention on you, it was like being in the spotlight. She made me feel special, chosen. I couldn't see that the spotlight was actually a searchlight, finding all my insecurities and exploiting them. I reached over and squeezed his hand. The Blackwells are expert manipulators, Jason. They've had a lifetime of practice. That doesn't excuse what I did, he insisted. I knew using your signature was wrong. I knew excluding you from wedding events would hurt you. I chose to look the other way because confronting Tiffany meant possibly losing her. And I'd tied my whole future to her. What will you do now? I asked softly. Jason set down his mug and leaned back, looking suddenly exhausted. Honestly, I don't know. My apartment is filled with wedding gifts I'll have to return. Half my friends are Tiffany's friends. My job. He trailed off. Your job. I prompted, concerned. William got me an interview at his friend's tech firm. I was supposed to start there next month. Double the salary, corner office. He laughed bitterly. Another way they were buying control over my life. We talked late into the night, piecing together how completely the Blackwells had worked to integrate Jason into their world while systematically cutting ties to his past. They had introduced him to better friends, suggested more suitable hobbies, even encouraged him to reduce contact with our parents because their divorce was embarrassing. The next morning, Jason called Melinda Barnes to officially cancel the wedding and determine what financial obligations remained. To our shock, she informed us that all deposits were non-refundable, but she personally would ensure my name was removed from all documentation. For what it's worth, Ms. Miller, she added quietly, I had no idea the financial agreement wasn't legitimate. The Blackwells assured me everything was properly arranged. Over the following weeks, Jason moved out of his apartment, which held too many memories of Tiffany, and temporarily stayed in my spare room while he sorted out his life. We worked together to return wedding gifts, notify guests of the cancellation, and deal with the legal aftermath of the fraud committed in my name. The Blackwells, predictably, threatened legal action for wedding costs incurred, but backed down quickly when my attorney friend Michael sent a formal letter detailing the fraud and identity theft we were prepared to pursue charges for. In the end, they decided that distance from the situation was preferable to prolonged legal battles that might generate publicity. As word spread about what had happened, we received an unexpected outpouring of support. Several of Jason's friends confessed they had always felt something was off about Tiffany, but hadn't wanted to say anything. One of Jason's groomsmen, Derek, even admitted that Tiffany had tried to exclude him from the wedding party because she felt he was too working class for photos. 6 weeks after the dramatic dinner at the Blackwell estate, Jason received a job offer from a startup that had admired his work for years. No connections required, just recognition of his genuine talent. He found a new apartment, began rebuilding his confidence, and slowly returned to being the authentic person he had been before meeting Tiffany. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said to me over dinner one night. "I'm not even sure I ever really loved Tiffany. I loved the idea of her, the status of being with her. But when I try to think of genuine moments of connection between us, I come up empty." The most surprising aftermath came when two of Tiffany's bridesmaids, Ashley and Lauren, reached out to me privately. Both had been friends with Tiffany since college and had witnessed similar patterns of manipulation in her previous relationships. "She always targets men who are successful, but from different social backgrounds," Ashley explained during a coffee meeting. "Men who will be dazzled by her world and willing to do anything to be accepted into it. Usually, she gets bored after a few months, but with Jason, it went further than ever before." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Lauren looked uncomfortable. "Because we enabled it. We saw what was happening to your brother, to your relationship with him, and we said nothing. We've been doing that for years, and it's time someone stood up to the Blackwells and their daughter." Their honesty initiated an unexpected healing process, not just for Jason and me, but for others who had been damaged by the Blackwell family's toxic influence. Ashley and Lauren introduced us to two other former boyfriends of Tiffany's who had similar experiences of manipulation and financial exploitation. Together, we formed an informal support group for recovering from toxic relationships with wealthy, controlling partners. 3 months after the canceled wedding, Jason had lunch with Tiffany for closure. He returned looking thoughtful. "She apologized, in her way," he told me. "Said she got carried away with wedding excitement and might have crossed some lines. No real acknowledgement of the fraud or manipulation." "Did you get the answers you needed?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I think so. Mostly I realized I don't need her validation anymore. I don't need the Blackwell's world to feel successful or worthy." As summer turned to fall, Jason began dating again, this time with a much clearer understanding of what he wanted in a partner. He met Megan, a kindergarten teacher with a warm laugh and zero pretension, at a volunteer event. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than dazzle and status. The first time he brought her to dinner at my place, I watched them interact with relief. There was no power dynamic, no manipulation, just two people enjoying each other's company. When Megan insisted on helping with dishes despite Jason's protests, teasing him about his terrible drying technique, I caught his eye across the kitchen and saw the contentment there. Meanwhile, my own career flourished in unexpected ways. The skills I developed documenting the Blackwell situation, organization, evidence gathering, clear communication during conflict, led to a promotion at work when a major client crisis needed similar handling. My boss was impressed by my ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics while maintaining professional boundaries. The experience with Tiffany and her family had been painful, but it had clarified what truly mattered in relationships and taught both Jason and me to recognize manipulation before it could take root. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most difficult packages. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Jason and I sat in our childhood backyard, sharing a bottle of wine with our parents. The autumn leaves created a canopy of red and gold above us, and the slight chill in the air was offset by the warmth of laughter and conversation. "I still can't believe you walked out of the Blackwell mansion with all those fancy people watching," our mother said, shaking her head in amazement. "My shy little boy standing up to Boston's elite." Jason smiled, the confidence that had been missing during his time with Tiffany now fully restored. "I had a good example," he said, raising his glass toward me. "Sam taught me what real loyalty looks like." Our father, who had flown in from Arizona specifically for this reunion, cleared his throat. "I owe you both an apology," he said seriously. "When your mother and I divorced, we were so caught up in our own drama that we failed to be the parents you deserved. You two raised each other in many ways, and you did a damn fine job of it." "We did okay," I agreed, looking at my brother with pride. The past 6 months had been a journey of rebuilding, not just Jason's life, but our relationship, which had been tested in ways we never imagined. After leaving the Blackwells behind, Jason had committed to therapy, working through the manipulation he'd experienced and examining why he had been vulnerable to it in the first place. His therapist helped him recognize how his insecurities about not being good enough had made him susceptible to Tiffany's tactics. "It's like I was wearing Tiffany-colored glasses," he explained during one of our weekly coffee meetups. "I couldn't see her clearly because I was so dazzled by the lifestyle she represented. I thought being accepted by her family meant I had finally made it." His therapy journey revealed patterns stemming from our parents' divorce, particularly his fear of abandonment and deep-seated belief that he needed to earn love through achievement or sacrifice. These revelations helped him build healthier boundaries and recognize red flags in relationships. What surprised us both was how many people reached out after hearing our story. Brothers and sisters of friends who had experienced similar manipulation by partners. Colleagues who had been financially exploited by romantic interests. Each story followed a similar pattern: isolation from loved ones, financial entanglement, and a gradual erosion of self-worth. Inspired by these conversations, Jason and I started a monthly support group called Relationship Red Flags, an informal gathering where people could share experiences and learn to recognize manipulation tactics. What began as 6 people in my living room grew to over 30 members meeting at a local community center. "I never thought something so painful would turn into something so meaningful," Jason admitted during our 3rd meeting, after a participant tearfully thanked him for sharing his story. "If even one person avoids what I went through, it was worth it." His relationship with Megan continued to blossom, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Unlike Tiffany, who had wanted to remake Jason into her ideal partner, Megan appreciated him for exactly who he was: dad jokes, science fiction obsession, and all. "She asked me yesterday if I wanted to meet her parents," he told me over lunch one afternoon, looking both excited and nervous. "They're coming to town next weekend." "That's a big step," I observed. "How do you feel about it?" "Good, actually. They're elementary school teachers who live in a small town in Maine. They're bringing homemade blueberry jam and want to go to the science museum." He laughed. "Quite a change from the Blackwells and their country club dinners. Are you worried about, comparing them?" I asked carefully. He considered this, then shook his head. "Tiffany's family had wealth and connections, sure. But Megan's family has something the Blackwells never did: genuine happiness. When she talks about them, her face lights up. She's not trying to impress anyone or maintain some image. That's worth more than all the Blackwell millions." My own life had taken positive turns as well. The leadership I demonstrated during the Blackwell situation caught the attention of senior management at my company. When a challenging client required someone with strong boundaries and clear communication skills, I was tapped to lead the project. "You handled a fraudulent family situation with more grace than most people could muster," my director explained when offering me the promotion. "If you can navigate that while maintaining your professionalism, you can handle anything our clients throw at us." The promotion came with a substantial raise, ironically almost exactly the $50,000 the Blackwells had tried to extract from me. I used part of it to take a long postponed vacation and invested the rest, building the financial security I had worked so hard for. More importantly, the experience taught me valuable lessons about setting boundaries and trusting my instincts. I had sensed something was off about Tiffany from the beginning, but had ignored my concerns to support Jason. Now I knew that true support sometimes meant speaking uncomfortable truths, even at the risk of temporary conflict. As we sat in our parents' backyard that autumn evening, sharing stories and reconnecting as a family, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing during the tumultuous wedding planning months. "You know what's funny?" Jason said, refilling our wine glasses. "If you had told me 6 months ago that my canceled wedding would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are." "Here we are," I echoed, raising my glass. "To dodging bullets and finding better paths. To siblings who save you from yourself," Jason added with a grateful smile. Our mother leaned forward, her expression curious. "Whatever happened to the Blackwells? Any fallout from their scheme?" "Tiffany got engaged again 3 months later," Jason replied without bitterness. To a hedge fund manager whose family apparently passes their social standards. And the wedding fraud? Our father asked. Let's just say that when several victims compare notes and have documentation, even wealthy families prefer to make quiet restitution rather than face potential charges, I explained. The money wasn't the point, though. It was about making sure they couldn't do this to anyone else in our circle. As darkness fell and we moved inside for dessert, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out. If I hadn't discovered the fraud, Jason might now be trapped in a marriage built on manipulation and deceit. I might be facing financial ruin from debts I never agreed to take on. The Blackwells would have continued their pattern of using wealth as a weapon. Instead, we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected, not just to each other, but to a community of people learning to recognize and resist toxic relationships. The wedding that never happened had ultimately given us gifts far more valuable than anything on a registry. Later that night, as Jason and I walked back to our childhood bedrooms, he paused in the hallway. "Sam, I never properly thanked you," he said seriously. "Not just for saving me from a terrible marriage, but for never giving up on me even when I was being a complete idiot." "That's what siblings do," I replied simply. "We see each other through the good and bad decisions. We tell the truth when no one else will." He hugged me tightly. "I promise I'll do better at listening to you the next time you tell me my girlfriend is a manipulative fraud." "Deal," I laughed. "Though maybe aim for one who isn't?" "Working on it," he promised with a smile. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the most painful experiences become our greatest teachers. The Blackwell wedding debacle taught us about boundaries, self-worth, and the true meaning of family. It showed us that real relationships aren't built on social status or financial transactions, but on mutual respect and genuine care. And that lesson was worth far more than any $50,000 deposit. Have you ever had to stand up to someone manipulating a loved one? What red flags do you look for in relationships? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the happiest endings come from the courage to walk away from the wrong situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps anyone facing similar challenges to find their strength and voice.